climate journalism needs to change. There is a reason why climate activists seem very extreme and alarmist. The media does not properly portray the urgency and impact of climate change, which causes the average climate change believing person to not get as involved in the movement or sympathize with the science. This video will cover 3 parts of the media miscoverage on climate change: the harms that a super speed news cycle has on climate communication, the downplaying of the catastrophic consequences of climate change, and the misrepresentation of facts and science of climate change by trying to be nonpartisan. The first point I want to address is how our super speed news cycle is harming climate communication. The media has to constantly have new news to keep people engaged, which means they can't properly cover big issues like climate change. Climate change unfolds over decades, and our news system cannot handle this in its current format, so it waits until temperature records break or major cities flood to even mention climate change. Secondly, many media agencies downplay the urgency and impacts of climate change to their audiences. Honestly, from a business perspective, this makes sense. If you depress your customers, then they will stop using your service. This results in newscasters saying things like, "It's a great day to go to the pool with your family and enjoy the warm weather," while overlaying pictures of children eating ice cream, while deadly heat waves sweep the region. Also, since newscasters don't understand the science, they often say blatantly false statements. For example, when a climate scientist spoke of the lethality of the heat catastrophe that happened back on July 19 with reporters from GB News, a UK news program, the reporter responded with, "I want us to be happy about the weather. I don't know whether something's happened to meteorologists to make you all a little bit fatalistic and harbingers of doom, because all of the broadcasts, particularly on the BBC, every time I've turned it on, someone is talking about the weather. They're saying that there's going to be tons of fatalities, but haven't we always had hot weather? Wasn't the summer of 76? That was as hot as this, wasn't it?" The scientist promptly answered no. While I cut some of the stuttering out of that quote, that is what she said. Both the intentional underrepresentation of facts and the lack of climate change knowledge that reporters have can incredibly misrepresent the severity of climate change. Also, if you look up articles and news clips about the heat on July 19th, they all talk about the heat wave. While it was a heat wave, it was a heat wave caused by climate change. Even the articles that do say this bury it deep in the text instead of presenting it in the headline. If you do not emphasize that this is caused by climate change, you are doing a disservice to humanity. Additionally, there's almost no coverage of the developing world. If runways are melting in Britain and fires are raging across southern Europe, imagine how hot it is in Algeria. The next point I want to cover is that many news sources try to come off as nonpartisan and end up misrepresenting facts. The media will try to provide both sides of the argument and end up not pointing out the flaws in one of the arguments. Not every issue has 2 sides. Sometimes one side is just right and the other is simply wrong. The perfect example of this is from a San Diego Union Tribune article about protests that took place outside of energy giant Sempra's headquarters in San Diego. Full disclosure, I was at these protests. If you think this makes me biased, so be it, but I will present the facts. To give you some context, the protests were against Sempra's support of the California Public Utilities Commission's proposal to, put simply, tax solar homeowners $300 to $600 per year and cut their credit when the energy they produce from their panels is sent back to the grid. This policy would disincentivize solar and put it out of reach financially for the many who do not yet have solar. After the protests, I went online to see what the news had written about it, and I was shocked. A CBS 8 article presented arguments from both sides and promptly ended without digging any deeper. A San Diego Union Tribune article was even worse. It presented arguments from both sides and said, quote, "Some clean energy and environmental groups immediately condemned the proposed decision," and later said, quote, "But the utilities are not alone in calling for changes. The National Resources Defense Council, energy academics such as Severin Borenstein at UC Berkeley, and the Utility Reform Network and the Public Advocates Office consumer groups have all said that the cost shift issue needs to be corrected." This article presented this in a way that made it seem like NRDC and UC Berkeley, Two institutions which I strongly trust thought the proposal was good. I dug into the two NRDC articles and the article from economist Severin Borenstein from UC Berkeley, and I learned that they did not support the Utilities Commission's proposal, but did support updating California's outdated net metering policies. In fact, NRDC's articles outline ways of further incentivizing solar with an updated proposal, and these methods are not used in the Utilities Commission's current proposal. Also, both Borenstein's article and NRDC's articles were published before the Commission's current proposal was even released. The protests in San Diego were not protesting changing the system at all. They were protesting the proposed legislation from the Utilities Commission. In trying to stay nonpartisan, the San Diego Union Tribune misrepresented the facts and made climate activists seem like rambling lunatics who hadn't done their research, when in reality, they had the same views as top academics and climate groups. Tying this back to what I said earlier, climate activists can seem like alarmist blabbermouths sometimes, but they have good reason to be. Through activism, they have learned that the media is not properly covering climate change, and they have learned the details about climate change and understand its urgency. Luckily, it isn't hard to get past these media roadblocks. Firstly, doing a lot of research can help. Reading many different trusted sources to get a full picture of the issues instead of relying on one article to fill you in is greatly beneficial. Also, generally, reading articles is better than watching the news. This is because A, articles are generally more accurate because they don't have to fill a 24-hour TV schedule, so they can stop once they've presented all the facts instead of blabbering on, and B, you can more easily check the sources they cite. As I have shown though, articles still can misrepresent information, so go down the rabbit hole and read what they cite whenever possible to get a more complete understanding. Climate change is here, and we have to do everything we can to stop it, and this means working past these roadblocks and sharing the truth.